Number one, Ibble Dibble here. Hello, friends. Welcome back to part 9 of Meghan in Vogue, part 2 of my Jameela Jamil roast. I really get into the weeds on this one, so if you were waiting for the extra boring, evidence-backed, statistics-based video that Jameela should listen to before she opens her mouth, this is it. You know me, this video is extremely long and mostly off topic, so as per usual, timestamps are in the description box below. I also want to very much emphasize right here at Jump that I am not suggesting what young women should or shouldn't do with their bodies. I am only suggesting that they deserve as complete information as possible to decide for themselves, not misinformation that manipulates them out of their money in the style of JJ and MM. I also want to remind ladies and men of all ages that it only takes one. You don't have to outcompete the universe. At any given time, it only takes one partner you're happy with, one job you're happy with. Whether you go with a looking for my one and only strategy or an on to the next one strategy is a topic for another video. You don't have to constantly self-optimize against standards you either don't agree with or find impossible to attain to be happy. Beauty standards and even their economic impacts are not a barrier to your personal happiness. But all of us have been confronted with the question, how much effort am I willing to put into this at some or many points in our lives? And that's what this video seeks to address. This video is an attempt to help you do so armed with facts, not bullshit, that's all. If you haven't seen my prior video chatting about the first 2 things out of 10, I believe Jameela gets very wrong in her Vogue op-ed, it's up in the cards, check that out first. Point 3, Jameela is just lying to you. It is economically rational for women to be thin. It's not fair, it's not right, I don't like it, and I'm sorry, but that's what's up. And the reason people like Jameela don't say this out loud is because they are not your friends. They just want you to subscribe to Earwolf and buy plus size undies on Insta or whatever. But I don't make a living off this YouTube channel, so let's get into it. Research shows that wealthy women are thinner than poor ones in most rich countries, including France, Italy, Japan, the US, Britain, Germany, Canada, Denmark, and South Korea, among others. There's typically a gently downward sloping relationship between most measures of weight, like body mass index, or the share of a population that is obese, and income as measured by wages, the share of people below a poverty line or their income quartile. So not only are richer women thinner than richer men, but the richer women are, the thinner they get. One notable exception to this trend is Middle Eastern countries, where richer women tend to be heavier. Not men, only women. There are 2 financial spheres where outcomes are influenced by weight: the marriage market and the labor market. First, the marriage market. Across cultures and countries, richer men value thin women as marriage partners, whereas richer women don't value thin men, but rather richer men. Currently and historically, looks are considered the most important trait in women, and income the most important trait in men in mate selection. There are thousands of studies that show this, but for the sake of convenience, I'll link below to a December 2017 Pew Research report titled On Gender Differences, No Consensus on Nature versus Nurture. Subtitle, Americans say society places a higher premium on masculinity than on femininity, because I will use more stats from them later. According to their research in late 2017, American men and women of all ages valued attractiveness much more highly in women than men, ranking it as a woman's most important trait. And perhaps more vitally for Jameela's audience, more than half of 10 to 19-year-old girls in America thought attractiveness was the trait that society valued most in girls, with 7 in 10 girls aged between 14 and 19 feeling judged as a sex object. How much mate selection preferences impact economic and social viability varies based on innumerable factors, but the perception of the relative importance of physical attractiveness and earning potential surprisingly actually does not lessen in countries with greater gender equality. To wit, I will quote a scholarly article titled "Are Sex Differences in Preferences for Physical Attractiveness and Good Earning Capacity in Potential Mates Smaller in Countries with Greater Gender Equality?" Published in the April to June 2019 issue of Evolutionary Psychology by a team based at the University of Strathclyde. Quote, "Studies reporting that sex differences in mate preferences are smaller in countries with greater gender equality have been interpreted as evidence that these sex differences in mate preferences are caused by the different roles society imposes on men and women. Here, we attempted to replicate previously reported links between sex differences in mate preferences and country-level measures of gender inequality in a sample of 3,073 participants from 36 countries. Data and code is available. Again, I'll link those below. Although women preferred mates with good earning capacity more than men did, and men preferred physically attractive mates more than women did, we found little evidence that these sex differences were smaller in countries with greater gender equality. Although one analysis suggested that the sex difference in preferences for good earning capacity was smaller in countries with greater gender equality, this effect was not significant when controlling for Galton's problem or when correcting for multiple comparisons. Collectively, these results provide little support for the social roles account of sex differences in mate preferences. In simple terms, whether or not women are equally as well educated as men, hired equally as often as men for equal roles as men, where they get paid as much as men, women still prefer richer men and men still prefer thinner women. Footnote, obviously I'm aware that a fifth of women identify as non-hetero and therefore likely will not try to select a male mate. There's less research on who they will select. Though one 2009 study titled "Preference for Attractiveness and Thinness in a Partner, Influence of Internalization of the Thin Ideal and Shape/Weight Dissatisfaction in Heterosexual Women, Heterosexual Men, Lesbians, and Gay Men," found that no such associations were found in the lesbian group. Moreover, in the workplace, as we're about to get to, there's again not currently enough research as to whether those perceived as non-straight women are judged by a different thinness standard and therefore receive a different weight wage penalty. Now, let's talk about the labor market. Obesity wage penalties do vary by culture. One Swedish study found that obese men were paid less, but obese women were not. But research in America, Britain, Canada, and Denmark suggests that overweight women do have lower salaries. In the United States specifically, where Jameela lives and works, obesity penalties also vary by skin color. John Cawley, the extremely well-respected health economist at Cornell University and editor of the Oxford Handbook of the Social Science of Obesity, which is the authoritative academic work on this topic, a collection of 47 related academic papers I highly recommend, divided into 5 main topics: 1, disciplinary perspectives on obesity; 2, data and methods; 3, the causes and correlates of diet, physical activity, and obesity; 4, the consequences of obesity; and 5, social science insights into prevention, treatment, and policy. Again, I will link it below. And I'm also going to link a 50-minute interview he did at the Cornell Library to introduce the book, which is on YouTube, but you know how YouTube works. It got less than 700 views and has been up for 11 years. Close parenthesis, close double parenthesis, comma. First published his paper titled "Body Weight and Women's Labor Market Outcomes" in the year 2000, but has updated it frequently, most recently in 2022. Quote, "Though this paper concludes that there is no effect of weight on the probability of employment or sector of occupation, this paper finds that weight lowers wages for white women. Among this group, a difference in weight of 2 standard deviations, roughly 65 pounds, is associated with a difference in wages of 7%. In absolute value, this is equivalent to the wage effect of roughly 1 year of education, 2 years of job tenure, or 3 years of work experience. In In contrast, this paper finds only weak evidence that weight lowers wages for Hispanic women and no evidence that weight lowers the wages of Black women. FYI, 59.2% of American women identified as non-Hispanic white in the 2021 census. It's unclear whether Black and Hispanic women are unaffected by the gender wage gap because they are better insulated from pay discrimination as members of a different protected class due to their skin color, or if they are simply incredibly unlikely to get hired for higher paying public facing roles in the first place, or a combination. In the United States, weight is not a protected class because it is not considered an immutable trait like skin color or disability. It is perfectly legal for any type of employer to discriminate on the basis of weight or BMI. Sex is a protected class, so sex plus weight discrimination, if it can be proven, can be sued for. The most famous example being the series of flight attendant weight policy lawsuits in the 1990s, but it is typically incredibly difficult to prove. Further, the wage penalty rises as weight increases. Overweight women suffer a 5 to 6% wage penalty, obese women a 10 to 12% penalty, and morbidly obese women a full 18 to 20% wage penalty. In other words, if you are on the border between obese and morbidly obese and looking for a new job, losing 65 pounds would ostensibly have the same effect on your income as getting a master's degree before you apply for your next job. If you're wondering if this only applies to women, yes, it does. There's no weight wage penalty for men until they hit the morbidly obese category, and at that point, in the United States at least, it is only a 2% wage penalty. Additionally, there are a couple different types of compounding effects. Holly is not the first economist to study the gender weight wage penalty. In a paper published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2007, David Lempert tracked the gender weight wage penalty for over 20 years between roughly 1980 and 2005 and found number one, as larger women age, they incur the effects of years of cumulative wage discrimination. So, controlling for other factors, their starting wages are lower, and throughout their working careers, they receive fewer raises and promotions. His second conclusion was that the penalty was becoming more severe, not less severe. Quote, "This paper shows that an obese 43-year-old woman received a larger wage penalty in 2004 than she received at 20 in 1980. But also that an obese 20-year-old woman today receives a larger wage penalty than she would have were she 20 in 1981. We might expect a declining penalty due to the increase in the percentage of overweight individuals because it has become more normal to be overweight. Instead, the stigma against overweight people has grown with their number. It almost doubled between 1980 and 2000. This may be because the increasing rarity of thinness has led to its rising premium," end quote. Although obviously I'm focusing on the United States because that is where Jameela lives, works, and influences, this is indeed an international issue. There's less research on this coming out of Africa and the Middle East, but where there is significant research, the situation in the US and other Anglo countries is actually less discriminatory than everywhere else, with the exception of some Nordic countries. In Mexico, for example, women one standard deviation heavier than the norm face a wage penalty of about 16%, double the wage penalty for the equivalent-sized American woman. And then, of course, just as in the US, local forms of racism and that intersectionality have their additional effects. So this is a legitimate feminist cause that should invite much more meaningful discussion than hashtag BOPO bullshit. I know this is a lot of stats. The thing I want to really emphasize is that the situation is worst for young women. The penalties for the combination of being young and either overweight or obese are higher than the penalties for the old overweight, old obese combos. And they're worse than they used to be. Jameela's target market is young women, and she's telling the women who are most affected by this discrimination to not care or give up. There's actually no indication in any research that body positive messaging has ever had any effect whatsoever on the gender, weight, wage penalty. The implicit associations test run by Harvard University has been asking test takers since 2011 to associate people of different races, sex, sexual orientation, and weight with words like good or bad. And while in general the findings are trending in a positive direction, discrimination on the basis of race and sex has fallen over the past decade, and negative associations of gay people have fallen by over a third, weight remains the exception. Attitudes toward heavy individuals have become substantially more negative over the past decade, shining light on the cultural context of Colley's findings. Finally, the same women who are more successful in the labor market because they are thin also marry men who are more successful in the labor market, due not just to their thinness, but to their likelihood of meeting them in the workplace. In short, the notion that clever and ambitious women can measure their worth in the labor market on the basis of their intelligence or education, and therefore need pay no attention to their figure, is a statistically disproven fiction. Further, the recommendation that if just one generation of women holds out and takes the hit in order to build a more equitable society, it will cure this particular gender wage gap is a statistically disproven fiction. Jameela is giving bad advice. Points 4/5, the causality between weight and wealth flows both ways because perceptions of beauty are largely socioeconomic. Obesity is frequently a product of poverty. Highly processed, calorie-dense, low-nutrient foods are cheaper than their healthy counterparts, much more widely available, both geographically in food deserts and at all hours of the day and night, in mini marts, etc., ready to eat with zero or very little preparation, making them the practical choice for people on very low incomes with very limited transportation options, working many hours of the day. To add insult to injury, these highly processed foods are marketed as treats, the only kind of luxury you can afford, the only nice little thing you can buy your kids. So being poor very much does make you fat. And thanks to the weight wage penalty, being fat keeps you relatively poor. At the other end of the spectrum, being thin makes you money. Being thin gives you an edge. It makes marrying up accessible, and at work, you are likely to be remunerated commensurately with your perceived class. Likewise, at least after 30 or so, it takes some money to have a good body, just like it takes some real money to have good skin, good teeth, and good jewelry. Having money can keep you thin. Having money means being able to afford healthy food, exercise classes, a new bicycle, a gym membership, not to mention exorbitantly priced plastic surgery and cosmetic treatments. Jameela obviously acknowledged this pink tax, the notion that whatever their income, women feel a lot of pressure to maintain their highest possible level of beauty. And what that comes down to for women who really don't have a lot of money is tough choices, because even basic grooming is more expensive for women than for men. And tougher choices at younger ages, because unlike women who can afford Botox and dental care, poor women have to bust a move in the marriage market or land a job with a future at a stable company before their looks give out, if they want any hope of social mobility. One of the things that's so annoying about Jameela's advice to girls to just say no to paying the pink tax is that just saying no is a luxury only the bourgeois at minimum can afford. Everybody else needs to look decent to get a job. According to Credit Suisse customer research, consumers globally will pay an average premium of 9% more for environmentally friendly and healthy foods. However, young consumers in the rich world are less willing to pay those premiums than their counterparts in emerging markets. What Credit Suisse doesn't tell us is, are they less willing because they're less able, or are they less aspirational? Either way, disordered eating seems less a matter of personal responsibility than structural impacts, less a matter of young people trying to attain an aesthetic than adults lacking sufficient money, time, or energy to prepare healthy meals. But Jameela does not discuss political economics and medical justice with her audience because introducing them to those concepts would undermine capitalist system she thrives within. There's no real market for body griping when everyone has a path to a healthy body. And Jameela takes this victim of her own body narrative to the next level with maybe legitimate Munchausens, maybe narcissistic pity ploys, maybe just marketing to an unexploited base. I did link in my description box the video where I talked about all of the illnesses she and her mother claim she has had. Check that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. So she extra doesn't want people's health to improve on average. If people in the US could access legitimate health care more cheaply and more conveniently, especially mental health care, who would turn to her for wellness advice and guidance? We're not supposed to question why our food is ever less healthy, ever more polluted, ever more expensive. If we're not thin and healthy, it's our fault, and we should spend some of that money we're spending on junk food on a podcast subscription. So rich and beautiful people can teach us how to be rich and beautiful, or so rich and beautiful people like Jameela can just gripe with us about not being rich enough or beautiful enough. It doesn't matter. Just don't question the system. Rich or poor, fat or thin, the causality goes both ways. Beauty standards are not just about beauty, they're about class propagation. When we villainize the fat, we villainize the poor. And Jameela refuses to acknowledge this intersectionality because, again, it doesn't benefit her personally. Her target market is well-to-do, very young women with superficial, selfish concerns who were raised feeling comfortable with self-loathing. They do not want to be looked down upon, or at least want to be looked down upon less. But at the same time, they're completely fine with looking down on other people. There are plenty of overweight people who don't love being perceived as not classically beautiful, but really hate being perceived as low class. Let me remind you of Jameela's opening list of unfair beauty standards for women in the year of our Lord 2019. Be thinner, have longer legs, have a small waist, but have a big perp bottom with absolutely no stretch marks on it. Have a thigh gap while supporting this big bottom. Have big but eternally pert breasts, thin upper arms, and a defined collarbone. Have no lines on your face, but do not have a fat face. You must be very angular, but eternally youthful. You must have large eyes, a small nose, and big pouty lips, whatever your heritage. Whatever skin color you naturally are, it's the wrong one and must be immediately remedied with a tanning or bleaching cream. Have no hair anywhere other than on your head. Maintain immaculate nails, you dirty tramp. Please do not have saggy knees. They are so disgusting on women. Do not be weak and allow your body to give into gravity. Be lithe, but never muscular. Have no imperfections anywhere on your person. Cellulite is foul, and although all women on earth have it, you personally should not. Pull out all your gray hairs as soon as you see them, and then dye your hair immediately, so that nobody knows you've ever dared to grow older than 30. She's introducing these standards as new, modern, Western requirements, but they actually reminded me of the 10 wishes of Lady Putsiri, an ancient mythical queen of Luang Prabang in Laos. These beauty standards and other goals are from the 11th century. Number 1, wish to be queen of king in prosperity area. Number 2, wish eyes to be black like a 1-year baby. Number 3, wish eyebrows to be blue like bumblebee wings. Number 4, wish the name Putsiri remain forever. Number 5, wish to have a baby boy. Number 6, wish style stomach not to be big like general ladies when pregnant. Number 7, wish 2 breasts to be vertical like lotus, not be drooping when baby suckle. Number 8, wish hair to be black mainly and not to be gray like general ladies. Number 9, wish body to be smooth and beautiful forever. Number 10, wish prisoner to be executed to escape from death. Obviously, the wording could be more sophisticated, but that's exactly how it's translated in the Royal Palace Museum. A flat stomach, no gray hair, pert breasts, aging without wrinkling. These standards are not new, Western, forced upon us by media, or the root cause of declining mental health. Putseri also managed to say the quiet parts that Jameela is afraid to out loud. The goal is not only to have an unattainably beautiful body, either traditionally or enhanced, whether that be a surgically improved nose or eyebrows as blue as bumblebee wings, but also to be wealthy, of high social status through a romantic partner, above work, whether as a literal queen or as an influencer, trophy wife, trad wife, fundy, funtrepreneur, mediocre creative with inexplicable financial stability, etc. To live in celebrity and die in legacy, to maintain social, financial, and philosophical dominance even in death through not only this reproduction of your thought via fame, but your physical self via having children entitled to inheritance, and finally being perceived as charitable somehow. In Jameela's case, being the voice of imaginary oppressed people, but in Kim Kardashian or ancient Queen Putseri's case, freeing prisoners unfairly condemned to death. Jameela doesn't spit facts because she doesn't care to spark dialogue. She spouts virtue signaling nonsense to anyone who will tune in to promote herself as virtuous and get people to buy her other products to support her. And she's willing to risk their health and futures to do so. She proves that to us by consistently omitting historical and statistical context. So what is the actual problem that Jameela is not verbalizing? It's the failure of our current systems of law and governance to provide a sufficient minimum standard of living and equality of opportunity to achieve higher standards of living, or indeed much socioeconomic mobility at all. We need to look at this with a wide angle lens. This is a capitalism issue. Vogue magazine starving 14-year-old Russian models and Photoshop are symptoms, not the disease. Equal opportunity is an essentially socialist demand, and to make it of a capitalist economy via democratic language hasn't worked well in terms of volume, how many opportunities are redistributed, or in terms of speed, how quickly that redistribution occurs. To pretend this is working is folly, and Jameela and Meghan and the like are profiteers of frustration. So am I suppose. Although I assure you, if this video makes me $50, I'll be shocked. Pre-capitalism, in the days of absolute monarchy, when the socioeconomic hierarchy was acknowledged as extremely rigid, it was easier to accept that if you were ugly and poor, it's because you were born to be ugly and poor, of ugly poor parents, like everyone else. No harm, no foul, no fault, no failing. Over the past 200 years or so, as neoliberal philosophy has permeated education, capitalism has bested its competitors, even in places like nominally communist China. What people consider physically beautiful hasn't changed much. What has changed is their perception of the socioeconomic flexibility of the systems they live in. The systems themselves have cyclically loosened and tightened over and over, but the perception has been that these systems have become more and more flexible when that's simply not true. The result is that in 2023, most people are living in conditions akin to feudalism, while somewhat believing we're living in the Enlightenment. This cognitive dissonance is the mother of all the divisive, self-defeating ideologies we currently hold so dear. The Puritan work ethic, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Prosperity gospels, the law of attraction, continuous self improvement, fake it till you make it, personal responsibility, and identity politics. Ironically, one of the most reliable ways for individuals to escape the scarcity intrinsic in our current socioeconomic system is to sell the notion to others that this scarcity actually doesn't exist. Just some old-fashioned notions propagated by bigots do. And if you only pay someone who is rich, unattainably beautiful, above work, highly cultured, and charitable to teach you the secrets of their success, you can skip a few rungs on the social ladder, raise your class, your wealth, and your status extra fast. Promise. Because there might not be room for everyone at the top, but there's definitely room for you. Promise. And if you don't get there, don't blame the system, blame yourself, or blame the bigots. We find ourselves in a situation where, although structurally, obviously, of course, it's impossible for everyone to be at the top or near the top, it somehow remains the fault of the individual if they never get there. So there's an additional irony in that the people who follow people like Jameela, people like Meghan, are actually the ones trying the hardest to make the best of a system that oppresses them. In her 2015 book, Dangerous Digestion, The Politics of American Dietary Advice, book 58 in the textbook series, California Studies on Food and Culture, E. Melanie Dupuy, the professor and chair of environmental studies and science at Pace, wrote, quote, "The way in which Americans think about freedom and order is through creating a world in which one side is pure and the other side is impure, and putting a strong border between the two. This idea of purity is in our politics today, whether we are talking about immigration or creating safe food. When nutritionists talk about a healthy diet, they're always talking about Greece or France, or in the case of Michael Pollan's most recent work, hunter-gatherers in Africa. If you're thin, you are in control and orderly, a good citizen. We know if you're a bad citizen by just looking at your body. Bad citizens must then become targets of legislation or education. Either way, they are no longer our equals." End quote. I would add, all of that is quite aspirational. Greece, France, Africa. These are expensive vacations, not things you can grow on your windowsill. Now, Jameela is on the education side of things, but the same way legislation and education are two sides of the same coin, telling people to throw up their hands and say, fuck it, because they'll never be anything more beautiful or successful than they are today. So treat yourself with some chips and chocolate and soda, and telling people to throw up their hands and say, fuck it, because the man doesn't deserve their compliance. So treat yourself with some plus size fashion and an Instagram photo shoot, are just two sides of the same coin. Literal coin, get your coin. Which brings me to point 6. Portrayals of beauty have become much more inclusive over the past decade plus. Of course they have. People want to sell to their new, bigger, literally and figuratively, markets. The beauty industry has always thrived off creating dissatisfaction with looks, then selling relief. The Jameelas of the world are just one type of relief, a newer brand of relief, but diet pills are another, at-home workout videos another. The bodies in some ads may have changed, but the sales system is the same because the cause of the dissatisfaction is the same. And unfortunately, the stakes are ever higher as people find themselves in ever more dire straits. The only evolution in advertising here seems to be selling not trying alongside selling trying, because these account managers know very well you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't anyway. According to CDC research, around 20% of American women are on a diet on any given day. Although, according to Tracy Mann, a researcher at the University of Minnesota, who's been leading an eating lab there for more than 20 years, just 5% of people who lose weight keep it off permanently, and the amount they keep off permanently is quite small, only 1 kilogram on average. 2 years post-diet. People can only hope against hope that they will be the statistical outlier, which of course is very unlikely. At what point do we stop selling diet cookbooks and free weights and finally outlaw high fructose corn syrup? Everyone working in the $159.69 billion US dollar diet industry, projected by Custom Market Insights to be worth $305.3 billion by 2030, hopes never, including the hangers-on that profit wildly from pretending to oppose it, like Jameela. That's why Jameela led a campaign for stricter content regulations on Facebook and Instagram. She claims the I Weigh campaign succeeded in persuading these social media platforms to block posts about diet and detox products for minors, when, first of all, we all know it didn't. Minors still see this stuff all the time. And second, that fights the good fight only far enough to snuff out Jameela's competitors in the marketplace of ideas regarding body image, not far enough to have impact where it counts on the actual health of the people she claims to be concerned about, and is a double whammy for setting the precedent of making people think that censoring speech can be an answer to health problems without clearly defining what is and isn't misinformation. That does the public a disservice. What is and isn't misinformation needs to be made extremely clear. That said, completely incorrect, misdirecting diet ads existed for well over 50 years before the obesity epidemic and preponderance of restrictive eating disorders among teens began. Where did people like Jameela get the idea that the media was the problem and garner success for themselves running with it? In 1977, the obesity epidemic started in the US, mostly attributed to the proliferation of junk food and the normalization of snacking between meals. In 1978, Susie Orbach published what is commonly called the first anti-diet book, Fat is a Feminist Issue, in which she posited that gender inequality was what was making women fat because, one, by getting fat, women hoped to be taken more seriously in their working lives, whereas if they were thin, they would be treated frivolously by their male colleagues. Two, in a world of, shall we say, changing ideas about sexuality, it was a way to desexualize themselves in the male gaze. Three, many women had become their mother, but to the nth degree, torturing and triggering themselves with ineffective, old-fashioned dieting behaviors, mostly related to starving and binging cycles. And finally, concluding four, that all fat women really want to do is hide, but paradoxically, their lot in life is to be perpetually noticed. Fun fact, Susie Orbach went on to offer therapy to women with eating disorders, including Princess Diana. And this is largely the psychological process that Jameela seemingly subscribes to and describes authoritatively to her audience in some assuredness, I suppose, that it's correct. In her 1982 book, Having It All, Helen Gurley Brown, the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine in the 1980s and 90s, wrote, quote, "The most basic thing to get on with after your job or during it is how you look and feel. It is unthinkable that a woman bent on having it all would want to be fat or even plump. Dieting is hell. Bolded italic hell. And stop getting depressed about it! Exclamation point," end quote. In her 1990 bestseller, The Beauty Myth, Naomi Wolf claimed consumer culture's obsession with the female form was causing an epidemic of anorexia among girls and women, but a 2004 Trimbos Institute study published in the journal Eating Disorders found that 18 of the 23 statistics Wolf cited were inaccurate and overstated by an average factor of 8. I would argue that book is among the top 3 bestsellers written to terrify the mothers of teenage girls into raising them more conservatively. The others being 1971's Go Ask Alice and 1994's Reviving Ophelia. There's definitely a thesis to be written there somewhere about the commodification of the victimhood of teenage girls, and another about the labeling of both progressive and regressive ideas as feminist to confuse the public and malign and discredit feminists by association, when all feminism is the fight to ensure women experience equality of opportunity under the law, but not today, because I'm obviously going on long enough. In the late 80s and 90s, as the standard American diet was exported throughout the world, the obesity epidemic spread to other wealthy countries, and then not so wealthy countries in Europe and the Americas. Plus-sized modeling first became a trend in the mid-90s, with the first mainstream successful plus-size model, M, landing on People magazine's 50 Most Beautiful People list, and Peter Lindbergh shooting Anna Nicole Smith for Marie Claire Germany in 1994. By the mid-2000s, with the rising ubiquity of fast food, street food, mini-marts, and night markets, the obesity epidemic took hold across Asia as well. Presently, there are few countries not fighting obesity. Just 5 days ago, the Bloomberg YouTube channel published a video titled India's Obesity Time Bomb. Today, 1 in 4 Indian adults is either overweight or obese, showing that even in countries where starvation remains a very real threat, obesity coexists alongside. Ashley Graham, perhaps the world's most successful plus-sized model, having worked in Vogue, Glamour, Elle, InStyle, Harper's Bazaar, Sports Illustrated, etc., is 36 years old. She was scouted in 2000, signed in 2001. Her first shoot was for YM. Does YM even exist anymore? She old. The women listening to Jameela and complaining about a lack of fat acceptance and positing that A, the problem is cultural rather than economic, and B, can be solved via better representation in mainstream media, are literally too young to remember the world before the obesity epidemic and before plus-sized became mainstream, which it has, and perhaps that's why they can't quite put their finger on what injustice exactly they should be fighting. We know inclusive imagery doesn't work because, point 7, everyone's getting fatter and poorer. Even in countries traditionally seen as valuing and succeeding at thinness, and despite the documented economic value of female thinness in those countries, more and more people, and especially more women, are becoming obese. France is a great example. Between 1997 and 2020, the share of obese French adults doubled to 17%, or 8 million people. For reference, America is 40% obese, Mexico 33%, and Britain 26%. In France, the numbers tell us it is a class issue. According to a report by the French Senate, the obesity rate among manual workers in France reached 18% in 2020, whereas for managerial workers, it remains below 10%. Working class French men still have some of the lowest rates of obesity in the EU, but a full 20% of working class French women are obese. More than double the rate among the richest fifth of French women, among whom only 8% are obese. The idea that weight issues are food issues, are class issues, might be even better demonstrated in a racially near homogeneous society like South Korea that has only become associated with valuing appearances, thinness, beauty extremely highly over the past 15, maybe stretching it 20 years, so post-body inclusive marketing. I'm sure we're all familiar with K-pop, we're all familiar with the Korean plastic surgery industry. There, 37% of women in the bottom income quartile are obese, while just 22% of women in the top quartile are obese. And obviously, while the focus of Jameela's marketing and my criticism is women, and more specifically, girls and young women, the international childhood obesity epidemic is even more galling. But it's not just obesity, it's also restrictive eating disorders. In 2019, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition reported that global eating disorder prevalence prevalence increased from 3.4% to 7.8% between 2000 and 2018, even as beauty standards as portrayed in mainstream and social media became ever more inclusive. According to the NHS, there was a 37% rise in eating disorder hospital admissions between 2019 and 2020 as the pandemic hit. The rate of girls reporting depressive symptoms has increased as well. Researchers disagree about how much of the documented rise in mental health problems among girls is down to symptoms being more readily recognized than they used to be, and how much is down to girls' lives having changed, but clearly something's got to give. How much? Are beauty standards as portrayed in legacy and social media truly to blame? Point 8, according to research, much less than people like Jameela and Meghan would have you believe. Far more damaging than the size, age, or color of models in ads is the misinformation delivered by influencers like Jameela and Meghan to young women. According to Amy Orban, a researcher at the University of Cambridge Medical Research Council Cognition and Brain Sciences Unit, erstwhile winner of the British Neuroscience Association Researcher Credibility Prize, and author of academic papers on how social media affects young people, where a negative relationship between social media use and girls' well-being has been found, it was small, about the same as the impact of wearing glasses. And the direction of the relationship is unclear. Do they feel badly about themselves because of what they see on social media, or do they get on social media because they already feel badly about themselves? For an average teen faced with tough beauty ideals in a subpar food environment, the direction of causality almost seems unimportant because all of them are going through the same thing. But when it comes to anorexic and orthorexic teens and those with restrictive eating disorders, the direction of causality is of grave importance. The first scenario necessitates top-level policy change with some individual interventions. The second necessitates immediate, extreme, entirely individual interventions. Anorexia is the deadliest mental illness in the world. 1/5 of anorexics kill themselves. Not even close to 1/5 of psychopaths kill other people. The element of Jameela's messaging I find not just the most craven, but the most deeply disturbing is her claim that she was an anorexic and she blames her illness on traditional beauty standards as portrayed in British legacy media. Science does not bear out that supposition. Anorexia has a strong genetic component with problematic combinations of genes involved in regulating metabolism, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorders. People with an immediate family member who has experienced anorexia are 11 times more likely to become anorexic. There are very important differences between people suffering in this way and those simply forced into overly restrictive habits at a young age by stage moms. It seems very clear to me that for Jameela to even make the claims she's made, she must be part of the latter group, but for some, again, psychological or personal reason, unable or unwilling to blame her mother. Jameela, if you're watching this video because you have a Google alert for your name, definitely read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Anyway, for a 2020 article titled Awesome, Weird, and Everything Else, subtitle Being a Girl is Special, Difficult, and Better Than It Used to Be, reporters from The Economist interviewed and kept tabs on pairs of tween girls in Amsterdam, Boulder, Denver, London, Rotterdam, and beyond via Zoom for over a year about how social media affected their lives and feelings. Quote, girls balk at the idea that there is anything wrong with taking selfies and are keen to show how creative TikTok and Tumblr can be. They are clear that my body, my choice extends to being allowed to care about their looks. Ziggy in London says some people have an attitude that you can either be Instagram famous or smart, but not both. She rejects it. You can be like the male fantasy version of a girl and you can be interesting and have depth. Posting pictures of yourself does not take away your depth, nor do the images need to be of a particular type. Being a girl means I can be as girly as I want to be or not, says Alyssa, a 13-year-old from California. The known negative impact of traditional media, long home to airbrush and Photoshop, is greater than that of social media. Well-styled stocked with normies. The idea that photo editing tools on phones are inciting a plastic surgery boom is baseless. I think my parents think I'm some idiot who believes everything I see online, says Isla from Brighton with an eye roll. In general, girls don't. Pertinent example, if one from a small study, whereas 1 in 5 older boys think online porn is a realistic portrayal of sex, only 4% of girls do. When a class of girls in another school in Denver is asked to respond to a set of statements about social media, none of them agrees with, "I think all depictions on social media are realistic." Most assent to social media has impacted how I feel about myself, though. All support, "I've complimented someone else on social media." For girls, the online world is a place to act, not just absorb, end quote. They also interviewed people in child advertising about trends, including Debbie Clark from Busy Kids, a child modeling agency, who said, quote, "Advertisers demand a broader spectrum of types than they used to when looking for girls. For boys, one size still fits all," end quote. So if fake images of fake, beautiful, fake people in magazines and on Instagram isn't the problem, what is? I think it's that girls recognize the very real sexist socioeconomic reality they face, whether they've sought confirmation of their knowledge or not. The girls in this Economist article are the granddaughters of first women David Lempert studied way back between 1980 and 2000. They've witnessed the weight wage penalty grow and grow with their grandmothers and their mothers. The pressure is on whether they can name it or not. And they need help to practically plan for those implications on an individual basis. They need help from their parents, their schools, children's clubs, society at large. And instead, they're being told it's all in their head. Just stick your head in the sand. Or being sold some cockamamie non-solutions. And I wish I could say this was just people like Jameela and Meghan, but disturbingly, this stuff is coming from even otherwise credible sources. According to the Children's Society, through the decades, girls in Britain have consistently been unhappier with their appearance than with any other aspect of their lives. And they have a little blurb on their website where they very superficially mention the potential negative impact of beauty standards as portrayed on social media. They make it clear that it's essential to impress upon young people that the images of attractiveness they are confronted with daily are manipulated so far beyond reality they qualify as impossible standards, beggaring toxic expectations, and suggest the solution for young people lies in encouraging them to derive their self-worth from sources unrelated to their appearance. Of course, they're right, but I propose that is only half the solution. You're pruning the problem, not nipping it in the bud. Nipping it in the bud would involve established, well-respected institutions like theirs demanding action, demanding policy changes. Not just changes to prevent weight-based pay discrimination, but changes to ensure everyone, children, adults, men, women, other whatever, everyone has access to affordable, healthy, safe food and exercise. Because point 8, jerks like Jameela are happy to profit off of lack of access and confusion to keep moving the goalposts around health and mental health and weight and self-worth and sell. Being healthy, loving your body, and looking good are 3 different goals. I feel I don't even have to get into the weeds with this because it is so obvious. Of course, there are correlations. If you are severely overweight or severely underweight, you are more likely to suffer from heart attacks. Just from looking at those people, you might suspect something is wrong. But then, of course, there are people with beautiful bodies, bodybuilders, models, who look fine, but are very possibly eating in disordered ways, over-exercising, and consuming legal or illegal drugs to maintain their look. The debate over who looks healthy and whether they are actually healthy or not has no winners. It's so pointless. I can't even believe it's real and huge and profitable. In my opinion, we need to stop eyeballing each other's health status in this way. I really don't know why so many people indulge in it. I think they're trying to confirm personal biases about just desserts. No pun intended. I frequently see mentally and emotionally healthy people being told they're unhealthy and physically unhealthy people being told they are healthy. We need to stop expanding the definition of healthy to include unhealthy and vice versa, while acknowledging mental and physical health are spectrums. And at the same time, we need to stop judging people who are in fact unhealthy. Both. Some people literally do not have access to becoming healthy. I also think, given the stats we just discussed, we need to stop judging each other for prioritizing a beautiful body over a healthy body, or a subversively unattractive body over a healthy body. Some people are here for a good time, not a long time. For other people, it might be the only way to get out of bad economic situation. Others are choosing between their mental health and their physical health. I also think it's obnoxious to demand gratitude from everyone in the universe. It's okay to be thankful that you exist. It's also okay to regret your parents' choice. It's great to feel grateful for all the wonderful things your body does for you. It's also okay if you get angry at your body sometimes because it failed you. I feel like anyone listening to this video already knows better. I just wish I could speak to Jameela's listeners. Maybe you can have it all, maybe you can't. That's okay. It's simply not possible for everyone to have it all the time. And the only people who pretend this is possible are people who want to sell you something, be it a diet plan or a mental well-being app. People who conflate, confound, and confuse these three goals are bad actors or brainwashed. I think once we know that, it's really easy to see who is who and stop yelling at each other and to stop being so hard on ourselves. So I guess I will conclude this rant as promised with my very limited advice on this topic at 40. The most poignant quote to me of Jameela's, and one that she rewords and reiterates constantly, is this. Quote, "How can the decisions we make about our appearance be a choice if we're constantly bombarded with outside culture and society?" End quote. To be really annoying and answer a question with a question, in what other time and place can we make a choice? There is no alternative. This is our society. It has always been thus. As far as being a woman stuck in one earthly body, accept in advance that your relationship with it will change over time, and other people's perception of it and reactions to it will change over time. And that's fine because it can't not be fine. It's inevitable. It's fate. Let's focus less on redefining the word choice today and focus more on sorting out which choices we have control over. Let's make those choices and take accountability for those choices. All right, that's it. If you're still with me, thank you so much. Let me know in the comments below. Toodles. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.